Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a gripping, real-life mystery that totally blurs the line between clinical science and profound faith. We're talking about Saint Padre Pio. He was a humble Italian priest who basically became the center of decades of medical scrutiny, baffling physiological anomalies, and widespread reports of the supernatural. Whether you're coming at this from a place of deep religious belief or strict scientific skepticism, the documented source material is just an incredibly fascinating puzzle. So let's start with a really startling piece of data. 118.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, to put that into perspective, your normal body temperature is right around 98.6 degrees, right? And a fever of 107 sustained for even a few hours is usually fatal for a healthy adult. Yet medical observers and his own superiors recorded Padre Pio running fevers of 109, 113, and incredibly 118.4 degrees. These extreme fevers were so exceptionally high that standard medical thermometers of the time would literally burst. Doctors actually had to bring in a horse thermometer just to get an accurate reading. And this jarring reality is really just the beginning of the medical anomalies surrounding him. Section 1, the impossible stigmata. Let's walk through the timeline of his suffering. According to the records, it began between August 5th and 7th in 1918 with what is described as a spiritual piercing. We'll define that in a minute. Then, just a few weeks later, on September 20th, 1918, while he was praying alone in a chapel loft, the full stigmata manifested. These were open, bleeding wounds on his hands, feet, and side, corresponding to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. But here's the real enigma. These open wounds didn't heal. They didn't become fatally infected either. They remained open and bleeding for an astonishing 50 years. Which brings us to another physiological impossibility. Observers and medical investigators estimated that Padre Pio lost roughly half a pint of blood every single day from these wounds. Half a pint every day? Over 50 years, the sheer volume of that blood loss is absolutely staggering. Medically speaking, losing this much blood daily should inevitably lead to severe anemia, extreme weakness, and eventually death. But despite this constant depletion, he kept up a rigorous, exhausting daily schedule, often hearing confessions for hours on end and performing his full duties in the monastery. So, as you might expect, doctors examined him. The situation drew intense clinical scrutiny. Medical professionals, investigators from the Holy Office, and plenty of skeptics descended on his monastery looking for rational, scientific explanations. They examined him repeatedly over the years, attempting to investigate these events using strict clinical methods to see if the wounds were self-inflicted, if they were somehow being kept open artificially, or if there was any underlying psychological or physiological condition that could explain something that totally defied basic medical logic. The main skeptical theory at the time was that he was secretly using carbolic acid to burn his own skin, basically faking the stigmata to draw attention to himself. But, as the source material points out, claims of carbolic acid use could never be scientifically supported against the reality of the wounds. The tissue damage just didn't match up with acid burns. Despite intense investigations, absolutely no one could prove self-infliction. These unexplained wounds remained a genuine medical enigma that frustrated some of the brightest doctors of the era. Section 2, baffling medical phenomena. So, beyond those impossible thermometer-bursting fevers, medical observers were completely puzzled by his diet. On many days, he survived on virtually nothing. We're talking just a mere cup of hot chocolate for dinner, or maybe a single glass of beer, taking no other substantial food. Now, combine that with a daily half-pint blood loss, and his survival should be scientifically impossible. On top of that, he famously refused anesthesia when he had to undergo actual medical surgery. Doctors operated on him while he was fully awake, though he did eventually pass out from the excruciating pain of the procedure. To really grasp the origins of his physical trauma, we need to look at this term, transverberation. In mystical theology, this is a spiritual piercing of the heart. But in Padre Pio's case, it resulted in a very real, physical bleeding wound in his side. According to his own accounts from August 1918, he experienced a vision of a heavenly figure with a sharp, flaming steel blade that was thrust into his side, leaving a physical injury that mirrored a lance wound. Section 3. Witnesses reported the impossible. There is this incredible contrast to his existence. Physically, Padre Pio lived under strict isolation in a monastery in San Giovanni Rotondo, Italy. He practically never left. Yet people adamantly reported his physical presence in distant locations all over the globe. He was cited by a family in Flushing, New York. He was reportedly seen in Lisbon. And
Witnesses even reported seeing him on the battlefields of World War I. This phenomenon is known as bilocation, the ability to be in two places at once. And witnesses reported more than just fleeting ghostly visions. They described undeniably physical interactions. For example, an entire family in New York testified that a strange Capuchin monk, who they later identified as Padre Pio, arrived in the snow to physically administer last rites to a dying man in a coma. In another documented account, an innocent woman facing a firing squad was saved when soldiers heard an imperious voice shout, "Enough!" a voice her sister identified as Padre Pio's. Other widespread reports included an overpowering scent of roses and violets emanating from him, known as the odor of sanctity, and this unnerving ability to read the souls of visitors, often reminding them of hidden sins they had completely forgotten to confess.
Ultimately, the crucial point to take away from all these extraordinary accounts is the underlying human element. Amidst the bursting thermometers, the bleeding wounds, and the bilocations, the sources consistently describe a humble priest carrying a hidden burden to help others. He utilized his deep prayer life and his inexplicable suffering to bring comfort, physical healing, and deep peace to the desperate people who flocked to him from all over the world.
Section 4. A humble priest's legacy.
Just look at the sheer scale of his real-world impact today. This is the Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza, which translates to the Home for the Relief of Suffering. Padre Pio founded this hospital in 1940, famously starting with just a single coin as a donation, and it opened its doors in 1956. Today, it is a massive, highly specialized scientific research center with roughly 1,000 beds, over 2,500 employees, and more than 57,000 hospitalizations every single year. It stands right there in San Giovanni Rotondo, born directly from a visionary priest's deep desire to relieve the suffering he saw around him. It's incredible. This institution is actually recognized by the Italian Ministry of Health as a premier research hospital, focusing on genetics, oncology, and regenerative medicine. But it has never lost its founder's vision. It perfectly embodies his mission to treat the whole person by integrating cutting-edge, world-class medicine with profound spiritual solace. They are treating the body, the mind, and the spirit within a modern, evidence-based framework.
Section 5. Miracle or medical mystery.
So as we bring the clinical data and the spiritual accounts into focus, how do we categorize the life of a man who built a world-class science hospital, yet bled daily for 50 years with fevers that literally broke thermometers? Well, consider the startling detail that was only revealed much later. Remember when we mentioned he passed out from the pain of surgery without anesthesia? During that time, while examining him, doctors discovered a hidden wound on his shoulder. Padre Pio later confided in a young priest, who, by the way, would eventually become Pope John Paul II, that despite the highly visible stigmata on his hands and feet, his greatest physical pain was actually this hidden shoulder wound, mirroring the injury of carrying a heavy wooden cross. So even his most public suffering masked an even deeper, hidden agony.
Which brings us to our final thought. We have decades of clinical scrutiny, doctors baffled by extreme fevers and impossible blood loss, the tangible legacy of a cutting-edge medical research hospital, and thousands of eyewitness accounts of the seemingly impossible. So I'll leave you with this to ponder as you weigh the clinical evidence against the profound faith. When looking at the life of Saint Padre Pio, are we looking at an unsolved medical mystery, or are we looking at a genuine miracle? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.